All right, folks, gather around because apparently your boy broke the internet by noticing things. That's right. I dared to point out that Kendrick Lamar's halftime show had 0 white dancers. And just like that, the usual suspects, unhinged leftists, Reddit crybabies, and self-proclaimed defenders of diversity descended upon me like it was the George Floyd riots all over again. Now, these are the same people who demand that every movie, ad, and boardroom look like a progressive bingo card. But suddenly, when it's an all-black lineup, crickets. Or worse, I'm the racist for even mentioning it. Welcome to 2025, where diversity means shut up and don't ask any questions. Now, here's what happened. During the Super Bowl halftime show, I made a simple observation on Threads about the performance lineup, noting something that was both painfully obvious and worth discussing. That single statement was enough to send leftists, race hustlers, and DEI peddlers into a full-blown meltdown. The outrage spread to Reddit, with users twisting my words and projecting their own assumptions onto what I actually said. The mind-numbing hysteria ultimately exposed the selective nature of the left's so-called diversity standards, where certain exclusions are excused and questioning them is met with instant schizophrenic-level tantrums. So today we're breaking down the uproar because nothing is funnier than the leftists tripping over their own contradictions. Now, before we jump in, let's get one thing straight. Both of the platforms we're about to discuss have a massive, undeniable bias against conservatives. This isn't speculation, it's not paranoia, it's just the reality of the digital landscape, where big tech's definition of free speech seems to end the moment a conservative opens their mouth. Let's start with Threads, Meta's sad attempt at an X clone. Despite all their recent noise about pushing more political content, conservative voices are constantly throttled, shadow banned, and outright suppressed. They'll let the most deranged leftist rants thrive, but the moment you question the narrative, your reach mysteriously vanishes, a phenomenon covered by Forbes in 2023. And this isn't just limited to Threads, it's a platform-wide issue with Meta. During the COVID-19 pandemic, Meta faced criticism for censoring content that challenged government-backed narratives, including discussions on vaccine efficacy, lockdown measures, and alternative treatments, including posts from organizations like Children's Health Defense, which led to legal challenges. Moreover, internal communications revealed that Meta acquiesced to pressures from the Biden administration to suppress certain stories and conservative voices, as exposed in the Murthy v. Missouri lawsuit. In one of those instances, the administration urged Meta to censor content related to COVID-19 that contradicted official narratives, including discussions on vaccine efficacy and the lab leak theory, the latter of which was recently confirmed to be real by the CIA. Additionally, Meta censored posts about the Hunter Biden laptop story, labeling it as potential misinformation. These actions underscore Meta's role in aiding government-driven censorship, where the platform actively suppressed politically inconvenient narratives at the administration's request, shaping public discourse to align with state-approved messaging. Then there's Reddit, the internet's progressive playground, where pro-America and Trump-supporting communities have been systematically banned, while far-left and outright anti-American messaging isn't just allowed, it's promoted. Notable examples include the banning of r/the Donald, a subreddit with nearly 800,000 members, and r/Donald Trump, both of which were removed under the guise of policy violations. Reddit claimed these communities were banned for spreading hate and inciting violence, but of course, similar leftist communities that actively call for unrest, riots, and violence remain untouched. Wonder why? Maybe it has something to do with their Chinese overlords at Tencent, a company with deep ties to the CCP, according to the Wall Street Journal, which reported in December of 2024 that the Pentagon designated Tencent as a military-linked firm due to its connections to the Chinese Communist Party. Reddit has become a cozy part of China's disinformation campaign, amplifying propaganda while making sure that any prospective right of Karl Marx gets buried. Their commitment to diverse viewpoints is an absolute joke, unless by diverse they mean every shade of radical leftist and anarcho-communist nonsense. And this isn't just speculation. A 2024 study from the University of Michigan Ross School of Business found that subreddit moderation can exhibit unconscious biases, leading to the suppression of opposing political views. This suggests that despite Reddit's stated commitment to diverse perspectives, moderation practices seemingly favor extreme leftist viewpoints. Additionally, discussions on Reddit's r/change my view have highlighted perceptions that the platform's moderation tends to suppress right-wing perspectives, with users expressing concerns about its left-leaning bias. So it's evident that Reddit's idea of a balanced discussion is a Marxist and an anarchist debating whether to burn the flag or eat it, while conservatives get banned for just watching. Now, without further ado, here's what I said on Threads. Kendrick Lamar did not have one white person on his halftime show. These are the same people pushing for diversity. And just like that, the internet lost its collective mind. Now, let's break this down because apparently pointing out blatant hypocrisy is enough to trigger a meltdown from anyone with less than a half-functioning brain. You see, the same people who scream about representation in every industry, from Hollywood to corporate boardrooms, suddenly go silent when the lack of diversity isn't in their favor. We've been told for years that true inclusivity means ensuring a mix of races in every space. Yet when an entire performance is racially exclusive, suddenly it's just the best people for the job. Interesting. Now, this isn't about demanding quotas or saying every performance needs to look like a progressive ad campaign. It's about the double standard. A study conducted after the 2022 Super Bowl halftime show found that 58% of Black Americans felt that having a mostly Black lineup was a legitimate initiative from the NFL to be more inclusive. This highlights a key issue. Diversity is often viewed through a one-sided lens. When a space lacks Black representation, it's a crisis that demands structural change. But when the racial exclusion swings the other way, it's celebrated as progress. If this had been an all-white lineup, we all know the outrage would be deafening. The media, the blue check activists, and the Reddit warriors would be foaming at the mouth, calling it a reflection of systemic racism. But when the racial exclusion works in the other direction, silence, or worse, gaslighting. Suddenly, I'm the one making everything about race just for noticing the inconsistency. Funny how that works. And that's the problem with the DEI narrative. It's never about true inclusivity. It claims to level the playing field, but instead creates a new hierarchy where race and gender take precedence over merit and economic hardship. Instead of fostering fairness, it institutionalizes discrimination under the guise of equity, punishing individuals for factors beyond their control while rewarding others based on identity alone. For instance, in 2024, a federal appeals court upheld a jury verdict awarding nearly $4 million to a white male employee who claimed he was terminated due to his race and gender, citing the company's DEI efforts as evidence of bias according to the law firm Orrick, Harrington & Sutcliffe LLP. Additionally, a 2023 survey from HR Dive found that 52% of hiring managers at companies with DEI programs believed their organizations practiced reverse discrimination in hiring. But that's only half the story. The Heritage Foundation found in 2023 that many DEI policies disproportionately prioritize race and gender over socioeconomic status, systematically neglecting poor white and Asian communities. So while they tell you diversity is for everyone, the reality is that DEI isn't designed to uplift all underrepresented groups, just the ones that fit a very specific narrative. So let's call the response to my post what it is: selective outrage. These are the same people who demand equity, but only when it benefits them. The same crowd that will cry about a lack of Black representation in majority white spaces will turn around and celebrate racial exclusivity when it suits their narrative. The rules are never applied evenly because they don't actually care about diversity. They care about control. And pointing that out, well, that's why they're mad. Now, it should be noted that my post clearly resonated with a lot of people. It got nearly 7,000 likes, which is pretty significant considering Threads is a hard left-leaning platform. It's incredibly difficult to find conservative voices on there, and most of the platform feels like a left-wing bot farm, kind of like Twitter circa 2017. All that being said, here's one response to my observation from Charlotte Olivia, who said, "If you were paying attention, his message was about how Black people built America while they were enslaved. About 222 million hours worth of free labor valued at $97 trillion today. White people weren't enslaved to build America. Hope this helps." Oh, so now the Super Bowl halftime show is a reparations package. That's a new one. If Kendrick Lamar's performance was meant to be a historical lesson on slavery, I must have missed the part where he explained how corporate sponsorships and multi-million-dollar contracts are part of the struggle. But let's entertain this for a second. If diversity is about acknowledging history, does that mean we should exclude Black performers from any events tied to industries historically built by white labor? No. Exactly. Because this was never about history, it's just another excuse for selective outrage. Hope that helps. Now, this is Charlotte Olivia, the brain-dead author of that retarded response. Let's fact-check her claims because, as always, these viral numbers tend to fall apart under scrutiny. She says that Black slaves built America with 222 million hours of free labor, valued at $97 trillion today. Big, dramatic numbers, but let's take a closer look. First, let's talk about the 222 million hours figure. Where does this number even come from? Because when you break it down, it doesn't make sense. The transatlantic slave trade lasted over 200 years, with an estimated 4 million enslaved people in the United States by the time of emancipation. If you do the math, that 222 million hours is laughably low. Enslaved labor occurred every day, year-round, across multiple generations. So either she pulled that number out of thin air or she accidentally undercut her own argument. Then there's a $97 trillion valuation. That number is complete fantasy. While it's true that the labor of enslaved people was integral to building America's wealth, particularly in the industries like cotton and tobacco, the claim of $97 trillion is grossly inflated. Estimates of the economic contributions of enslaved labor, like those from historian James L. Houston, put the value of their work at $2.7 to $3.7 billion at the time, far from the $97 trillion figure being thrown around. Even adjusting for inflation, this number doesn't come close to $97 trillion. So where does this figure come from? Nowhere. It's a made-up number designed to fuel outrage, not reflect reality. Now let's talk about her claim that white people weren't enslaved in America. That's just historically false. While white people were not subjected to chattel slavery like Africans, indentured servitude was incredibly common. In fact, nearly half of all European immigrants to colonial America came as indentured servants, according to White Cargo, a book detailing the history of British indentured servitude. These people worked under brutal conditions, had almost no rights, and could be bought, sold, and punished like property for the duration of the contracts. And while indentured servitude wasn't lifelong or hereditary like chattel slavery, it was still forced labor that played a massive role in the economy of early America. So to sum it up, her numbers don't add up, her valuation is fantasy, and her historical take is incomplete at best. Yes, slavery had a massive economic impact, but turning it into exaggerated figures and ignoring other forms of unfree labor only distorts history. Our next response comes courtesy of Bella Lilly, who says, well, I'm from the UK, and I don't see America as a white country at all. I see America as a black country just with white presidents. Y'all white Americans love to act like it's your country, but you've never had that country to yourselves. Black people always have been there as long as the white man. Y'all white Americans be doing the most. Please recognize this. First off, Bella, 1776. Next, America has always been a melting pot, not just of black and white, but of every race, culture, and background you can think of. Sure, black Americans have always been here and their contribution to building this country is undeniable, but that doesn't suddenly make America a black country or a white country. It's everyone's country, shaped by everyone's history. And if you're suggesting that the country belongs solely to one group because of their historical presence, then by that logic, we'd have to make similar claims for every race and culture that has contributed over time. The truth is, the country doesn't belong to any one group. It belongs to all of us. And while it's important to acknowledge history, it's just as important to recognize the present reality that America is a shared space for everyone, no matter their race or background. So let's all recognize that this country is diverse. It always has been, and pretending otherwise only keeps us stuck in division. Anyway, this is Bella, clearly 2 neurons away from the bottom left of the IQ bell curve. Honestly, it's laughable that she's coming from the UK and trying to lecture Americans about what America is and isn't. Just a reminder, you guys lost the Revolutionary War back in 1776. So maybe it's not your place to be dictating the terms of this country now, especially when you weren't the ones who got to shape it. You created the problem by bringing enslaved Africans here in the first place, and now you're across the pond trying to solve it for us? Oh, hilarious. But the reality is, you don't get to define the narrative of a country you're not a part of. And frankly, America's complicated history doesn't need a British perspective to make sense of it. Now let's talk about how she's typing. She says, y'all white Americans. I gotta ask, why are you, a white woman from the UK, using vernacular that's typical of the American South and especially used by a lot of black folks? You're not even American, and yet you're out here pointing out someone else's whiteness while trying to throw around Southern vernacular to make a point about race in America? Is this the digital blackface people keep telling me about? Maybe you think it makes your argument sound more authentic or relatable, but let's be real. It just makes you look ridiculous. And about your claim that America is a black country just with white presidents, let's clear that one up, shall we? Black Americans make up just 13.6% of the U.S. population. So if we're calling America a black country based on population size, we'd have to rewrite the entire history of this nation. America is a diverse land made up of peoples from all races, cultures, and creeds. To pigeonhole America as a black country erases the contributions of everyone else and ignores one of the things that makes this country great, its diversity. So maybe, just maybe, stop pretending to know more about this country than the people who actually live here. It's about time you recognize that it's not just one race that built this country, it's everyone. But hey, Thanks for the unsolicited advice. I'm sure your perspective from 3,000 miles away is exactly what we needed. The next comment comes from Clarabelle, who said, "Stop making everything about race. Those were the best candidates for the job. If you worked harder instead of spending all day playing the victim and expecting handouts, maybe you could dance at the halftime show too." Now, first off, thank you for your comment, Clara. Let's start off by breaking down your tone. She's clearly using sarcasm to mock my point, tossing out typical conservative talking points like work harder and stop making everything about race. But let's be real. It's weak and it falls flat. These lines are just a deflection from the actual issue I raised, the hypocrisy of DEI policies which claim to champion diversity but only push it when it aligns with their narrow narrative. So instead of addressing the hypocrisy, Clara is attempting to turn my criticism of the halftime show into a lame gotcha moment, as if parroting conservative talking points somehow highlights the perceived suffering of those who rely on DEI policies when they feel excluded. It's a deeply unintelligent argument and purposely misses my point. Further, while she's mocking my point, Clara is actually inadvertently exposing the very hypocrisy I'm calling out. DEI policies push diversity until it challenges their own agenda. By sarcastically suggesting that I'm complaining about not seeing enough white people, she inadvertently reveals how DEI policies selectively apply diversity based on their own goals. She's essentially ignoring the fact that the performance was crafted to serve a very specific political narrative, not just to reflect merit or exclusivity. In doing so, she exposes the very real double standard I'm highlighting. Diversity is only pushed when it suits the agenda and ignored when it doesn't fit. Her sarcastic gotcha attempt only underscores how deeply entrenched these double standards are. Moreover, let's address how Clara's sarcasm completely misframes my intent. Her comment seems to suggest that I'm hoping for equity in the dancers, which couldn't be further from the truth. That's not the point at all. I don't care about equity in this case. I don't think diversity should mean forcing representation when it doesn't make sense. What I'm calling out is the hypocrisy of the DEI crowd. They demand diversity in every space, but when it serves them, they conveniently exclude anyone who isn't black, as if no one else, white, Asian, Latino, could possibly qualify to perform at the halftime show. The reality is they selectively value diversity when it fits their agenda, and that's where the inconsistency lies. I believe in merit, qualifications, and the idea that people should earn their spot, not be chosen based on quotas. If the best candidates happen to be all black, fine, let's see them perform. But it's hard to believe that in a country where black people make up just 13% of the population, the only qualified dancers were black. The performance itself was clearly designed to deliver a racial critique of America, and it's hard to accept that no one from any other ethnic group could have qualified. So don't cry about diversity when given the chance to follow the rules that you now mock, because the ugly truth about DEI policies is that they're often self-serving and easily discarded when it suits an exclusionary agenda that benefits from them. So while Clara is busy reframing my intent in bad faith and trying to frame this as me calling for equity, what I'm really doing is calling out the blatant double standard where diversity only matters when it serves a narrative. Now, let's not pretend we're talking about merit here, when the conversation is actually about how those who benefit the most from DEI get to selectively decide when diversity fits the agenda. Anyway, a screenshot of my post along with Clara's reply made its way to the Murdered by Words subreddit, and it went viral. Got 56,000 likes in just 2 days. Some of the responses are just classic, and they really showcase how people on Reddit are truly retarded. One user, Financial Tower 7897, chimed in with, "Oh, so now they want diversity at the big white boy owners show." Savage Parrot 81 responded to that saying, "LOL, imagine how much the NBA would suck if they went back to segregation." Kind of a dark but honest take, right? Then there's Recipe Funny 2154, who said everything they've been bitching about was essentially reflected back on them with a giant mirror, and they still don't get it. Eternal victimhood from a place of power. This person truly put the echo in echo chamber. And finally, Lil Pixie 02 summed it up saying, "DEI for me, but not for thee." It's clear that everybody's in agreement here in missing the point collectively. And if that wasn't enough, less than a day later, it went viral again on the same subreddit, this time accruing 16,000 likes with comments like this one from Yoldi, who said, "Ask him to point out a black person when Shania Twain performed." Skittles Unicorn also chimed in saying, "Come on, you had that fleshy cowboy hat guy. How much diversity do you really need?" And of course, Nano Tasher jumped in with, "Oh no, dismantling DEI backfired. Quick, Tell Emperor Trump. So now the extreme left is out here mocking me on Reddit, huh? It's funny how quickly people love to throw around sarcasm and mockery when they can't actually address my points. These responses are a perfect example of low IQ rhetorical tactics meant to deflect from the real issue. They conveniently deploy straw men in order to twist my point into something I never said, then tear it down with jokes and half-baked retorts. Not once did I argue for an all-white performance. I was pointing out the blatant hypocrisy of DEI when it's used to exclude anyone not fitting a particular narrative. But let's be real, logical debate isn't really Reddit's forte. It's actually where logic goes to die. Now, overall, the irony of these comments is rich. They call out a victim mentality while completely ignoring the very double standards DEI policies create. All these sarcastic, dismissive comments about diversity conveniently avoid addressing the real hypocrisy of pushing for diversity only when it benefits the DEI agenda. Instead of a meaningful conversation, we get snarky one-liners that barely touch the surface of the actual point. It's a clear deflection, but it's not fooling anyone who's actually paying attention. At the end of the day, it's clear that the conversation surrounding diversity and DEI isn't as simple as the narratives being pushed. We have to ask ourselves, why are we so quick to accept policies that selectively push diversity only when it serves a specific agenda? Why is it that when the conversation doesn't align with a preferred narrative, the facts get twisted, the points get mocked, and the real issue is buried under sarcasm and deflection? These aren't just political talking points. They reflect a deeper problem with how we view fairness, merit, and opportunity in this country. It's time we start questioning the very policies and narratives that claim to uplift, but instead seem to divide and limit the conversation. Are we truly advocating for equality, or just for control, dressed up in the guise of progress? The answers may be uncomfortable, but they're worth seeking out. So, as you digest this discussion, take a step back, ask yourself, what's really being sold to you, and whether it truly serves the ideals of fairness and inclusion, or whether it's just another way to impose an agenda. You tell me what you think in the comments down below. Hope you have a terrific day. Peace.